Hello and welcome back to the Scoop with Coop. I'm of course Coop, and in today's video, I'm going to be recapping all of Week 4 of this year's NFL season. And the first game on Thursday Night Football was the Seattle Seahawks on a short week of preparation, traveling to their heated rivals in the Arizona Cardinals and coming away with a 23-20 win. Now, for this game, the final score doesn't really indicate how much of, I don't want to say a blowout because it wasn't like that, but a kind of secured win that the Seahawks had. Because the Cardinals outscored the Seahawks by 8 points in the fourth quarter. So an 11-point game going into the fourth quarter kind of makes it seem like, okay, not exactly a tight contest, but credit to the Cardinals for finding a way to fight and claw and get back into the game and eventually getting themselves within being a one-score game. And I think for Arizona, there is some good takeaways to come out from this game, such as Marvin Harrison Jr. after responding from having a pretty poor game against the 49ers and kind of, I don't want to say building back the credibility that he had kind of lost, but working on his steps to redemption for not having great performances and not living up to his potential. And I think this was a great step in that direction. I do think that Kyler Murray being a leading rusher isn't exactly what you'd want. But whenever you're trailing, you don't really run the ball as effectively because you have to pass it. And that's kind of indicated by the 41 pass attempts that Kyler Murray had in this game for the Cardinals. But I do think that there is some good to come away from this for the Cardinals. And speaking of the team that actually won the game, the Seahawks. Sam Darnold, I think he's played spectacular for them. Obviously, he's not been like a top 5 quarterback or anything, but for what they had wanted from him, he's been executing that to a T. And outside of one game where they just barely found a way to lose, they'd be 4-0 at this point. Now, obviously, they're not, but you're on a 3-game win streak, and you've played good football. And Sam Darnold played, I believe, turnover-free football. I don't believe he had a turnover for a loss. He didn't. It was recovered by a tight end. But he didn't have a turnover. He threw for 240 yards and a touchdown, and he also ran for 24 yards as well. So he's kept the rhythm going. He's averaged 9.3 yards per throw, and that is just amazing. That's what you want. Every pass he'd throw would be for about 9 yards, and that's exactly what you want to see. And I think the number one guy that he's targeting is the number one guy that is getting his share of touches and probably should get more is Jackson Smith-Njigba with 4 catches for 79 yards. He had a great game. And then I also think Kenneth Walker had a good game too with 19 carries for 81 yards and having a 4.3 yards per carry number. So I think for both of these two teams, this is a rivalry game on short week of rest and preparation. You can kind of tell how the game went by the total number of carries that both teams had. Because for the Seahawks, the team that won the game, they had 35 carries. For the Cardinals, they had 17. I think that kind of tells the full picture of, the score may have been close, but the Seahawks dominated the time of possession and really kind of found a way to not put themselves in the best positions towards the end of the game. And I think that's more so a credit to Arizona than it is Seattle playing poorly. But I do think there is some good to come out of this game from both of these two teams. So the final score, Arizona Cardinals at home, falling short 23-20 to their heated rival in the Seattle Seahawks. And then the first game on the Sunday window was an early one in Dublin, Ireland for the first time, where the Pittsburgh Steelers eked out a close win, even though it really wasn't, against the Minnesota Vikings. And looking at for the Steelers, this is the kind of win that they usually put up early in the season where, outside of the fourth quarter where the Vikings had outscored them by 12 points, it wasn't close. It was a 21-6 game going into the fourth quarter. And I think the reason that the Steelers were able to get this, stifling of Carson Wentz and his ability is their pass rush. Because their pass rush was able to get to Wentz. And as an Eagles fan, right, the number one way that you want to beat Carson Wentz, get pressure to him, especially at this stage in his career, and that's what they did. And he just didn't have the time to be able to survey the field and properly drop dimes. And once that pressure kind of dipped off and they kind of went into, I don't want to say prevent, but more so being a bit more conservative and going with more quarters or just making sure that they don't get beat deep, that's whenever the Vikings started to get cooking in that fourth quarter, and that's how this game became competitive again. And I think Carson Wentz took advantage of the opportunities when they were given, except for the final drive, which Obviously, you want to execute on that, but there are tons of other issues for the Vikings, such as the pass blocking not being able to hold up against the Steelers' pass rush. Which, speaking of their defense, Pittsburgh's defense finally showed and played the way that they had paid the defense to. Is this is the most expensive defense in the NFL, and they've kind of played like it on Sunday. And for the Vikings, going back to them, I think that this game kind of, I don't want to say helps, but it does make me feel a bit more comfortable about this team, knowing that even whenever your defense doesn't execute at the level that they are capable of, you're able to have that grit and that tenacity to get back into the game, to where you're able to make a team that I think will make the playoffs kind of have to sweat a little bit and be like, ooh, I don't know. And I think some of that was self-inflicted wounds by the Steelers, such as towards the end of the game where they just had awful decision makings, where if you don't go for it on a 4th and 1 when you're averaging almost 5 yards a carry, that's a bit goofy to me. But they were able to find themselves getting back in the game, talking about the Vikings, and they did this with the backup quarterback, and when the running game wasn't really that great, although whenever you're trailing, you don't want to run the ball, you more so want to pass it to get back into the game. And kind of like the previous game that we've talked about, that kind of shows here, where the team that won the game had 22 passing attempts. The team that lost had 46. And I think that when you're Pittsburgh and you're running the ball this effectively with Kenneth Gainwell, which, you know what, salute, Super Bowl champion with the Eagles, go Birds. I think whenever you have that, you kind of need to capitalize on it, and I think that the Steelers did. Because they didn't just shy away from him and say, you know what, we're going to get you 10 touches, and that's going to be it. No. They got him 25 total, including passing. But sticking with the Steelers and, just balling out, Kenneth Gainwell obviously is just a stud. He played fantastic for them. And he was the main reason that the Steelers won this game. 35 receiving yards and 99 rushing yards on 2 touchdowns and over 5 yards a carry. That is exactly what you want to see, and that's kind of how they won this game. And I think for the Vikings going forward, they have a big play threat themselves in Justin Jefferson. And you got Jordan Addison lining up either alongside him or across from him, across the field. But I think that you need to hope that McCarthy's able to get back healthy, because he's still missing valuable time, because this would have been a great test for him. We know that he has that ability to come back into games, as we saw in Week 1 versus the Bears, and then kind of followed it up with a bit of a stinker against the Falcons. But he just needs to get more reps for them, and I think that obviously Carson Wentz is a good backup, but you're not going to win the Super Bowl, and you're maybe not going to make the playoffs with him as a starting quarterback at this stage in his career. So I do think that is just unfortunate for the Vikings being injured, but I do think that they, all in all, I'm going to include the fourth quarter, played a pretty decent game, and they played well enough to put themselves in positions to win, which is all that you can ask of a team with a backup quarterback. So I think overall, both of these two teams I'm not too worried about. This is a transition year for the Vikings and kind of a last hurrah for the Steelers. So, in Dublin, Ireland, the Pittsburgh Steelers at home take away a sneaky close win against the Minnesota Vikings. And then moving back into the States, we have the Atlanta Falcons at home coming away with another one of these blowout close games against the Washington Commanders, where for Atlanta, Michael Penix really redeemed himself after a poor outing against the Carolina Panthers. And I think that you do like that he is getting his completion percentage better in this game, as well as having, 12 yards a throw is ridiculous. But he did throw an interception again. Now, is that a bit of a concern? Yes, but you know what? You'll take it whenever he has a 90.5 QBR. He didn't put the ball in harm's way too much, except for that. And you do kind of like how he was able to lean on the running game. Even though the running game wasn't super effective, you do like that he's able to work in unison with that. Where, obviously, Penix, 313 yards is a very good total. And over 2 receivers over 100 yards. And that's very interesting, actually, whenever you think that one of them is a running back in Bijan Robinson, where he averaged 4.4 yards per carry with a touchdown. Very effective overall from him, because obviously if you can get a running back who can make impact on both the rushing and receiving aspect of the game. That's a game changer. But I think that for the Falcons, going up against an injured team, you don't like surrendering 27 points, and you don't like Washington making this a closer game than it needs to be, because I feel like if you take out the fourth quarter, and I know I've done that for the past 3 games, this is a 15-point differential. The Falcons would win this game by 15 if the fourth quarter didn't happen. Now it did, but I think that for Washington, you showed pretty good fight with a backup quarterback, and putting up 27 points with a backup quarterback is not a bad thing. And especially after being down 10 points at the end of the first quarter. I do think that there is progress here, and there's growth without your starting running back, receiver, and quarterback. And you know that your receiver and quarterback will be coming back. So I think that is steps and building blocks to getting to where this team wants to go. But it's also, if you want to win with a backup quarterback at any point, your defense has to ball out, and you need your running game to be effective. Now, the running game was effective, but whenever you're down, you have to pass. And your defense didn't hold up their end of the bargain, because allowing 34 points and allowing 31 points in the first 3 quarters is not acceptable. And I think that with this Washington team, obviously this isn't their best they're going to look, because they'll get Jaden Daniels back, and they will get Terry McLaurin back. Now, Austin Ekeler is done for the year, but I do think that going with this running back by committee thing is not a bad idea, especially when you have Chris Rodriguez and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, both of which playing pretty good, although it was only on 14 carries, but able to get decent yards after contact and just overall playing pretty good. Now, that could be because they were trailing, and teams are more so just like, as long as we don't allow big shots, we're fine with getting cut to death. Well, not to death in this case, as the Falcons won that battle to the death, but kind of getting the slow, taking time off the clock style of football, running the ball over and over again. I think that teams are fine with that whenever they're up. But I think that for Washington, that's how they want to play. And I think that they played pretty well, again, with a backup quarterback. And so I'm not too concerned about them going forward. So I'm not at all worried. Because it's like you're able to take a team that I think could be on the cusp of a playoff appearance to the brink, and you show that resilience in that fight to get back in it. And I think overall there are a lot of positives that can be taken out of this game. Now, speaking about the Falcons, I think that allowing them to get back into this game was just kind of ridiculous, as you need to keep on the gas. You need to keep your foot on their necks, and you need to keep going. And obviously they're able to finish the game out and close it out. But you don't like that they're even in a position to where, if Marcus Mariota didn't throw that interception and they didn't have a fumble go that way, maybe, I don't know. You don't want to be in that position, especially whenever you're up by 15 points. So I think that there is still some good to be taken out of this, but it seems like with this Falcons team, anytime you try to look for the good, you're going to find some of the bad. And I think overall for the Falcons going forward, I do think that they're still just a piece or two away from making a playoff push, but I do think that they're just on the cusp, and if they can keep working and keep improving and just get better, that they can really accomplish great things overall. And so, the Atlanta Falcons at home come away with the win 34-27 over the Washington Commanders. And then moving all the way up north, we have the Buffalo Bills at home taking on the New Orleans Saints. And there's not really much to talk about with this game, because Buffalo is one of the best teams in the NFL going up against one of the worst teams in the NFL. And the Bills won by 12. But the Saints were able to make this a pretty competitive game, because it was 10-14 going into half, and they did end up losing some steam as they got outscored by 17-9 in the second half. And obviously, you want to come away with the win whenever you're in Buffalo against a good team, and you're just on the cusp. You hope that a couple of plays go your way. But I do think that for the Saints, there is some good to be taken out of this game. Spencer Rattler, at the very least, is a serviceable backup quarterback in the NFL. And you know that you have a pretty good running game going forward for you. Those are two things that you can build on. And when you have an offensive-minded coach, if you can have both of those two things go your way, there are building blocks here to move forward with. And for Buffalo, there isn't much to talk about with them, honestly. Because this is a team that is built to play in February, hopefully, but at the very least January, and compete for a Super Bowl. And they handle business, and Buffalo is a great offense and a great team. But if one of their worst games that they've played all year, and they're putting up 31 points, that is kind of scary for the rest of the NFL to look at. And I think obviously some of their offense kind of comes just from the threat of Josh Allen's legs. I don't want to say somewhat, because it does have an impact. Because if you look at their running game, they average 5.2 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns, one of the touchdowns from Josh Allen. But he only threw the ball 22 times, and that's as many times as James Cook ran it. So they're a very balanced offense, which I do think is better for them in the long run. When you have a good running back like James Cook, which I think he is, averaging 5.3 yards per carry against what I think is, okay, Saints defense, and then you get Ray Davis getting in there, Ty Johnson and Elijah Moore getting a combined 3 yards on 3 carries for them. In reality, this Bills team is very good and built to play playoff football, and the Saints are built to look for the future. And I think that kind of is the difference between where these two teams are at. Again, I do think the Saints played a very respectable game, and there are some positives to take away from this, such as, again, Spencer Rattler. He played a good game, able to distribute the ball to a ton of his receivers and play well. I mean, he led his team to 19 points on the road in Buffalo against one of the best teams in the NFL. So I think there are plenty of things that you can walk away from this game and think, you know what, we have something here. You do probably need to go get better at some of the skill positions, like, in my opinion, running back. Because I do think that you do want to get a number 1 alpha back, although I do think Alvin Kamara has played pretty well. But I think that if you want to lean that way, you can when you're building. But, I mean, I would prefer if they were to go get a good running back and get rid of Kendre Miller, although I do think he is a good young running back. I just don't think that having this current backfield group works for them. But that could also be a factor of them not having the best offensive line. So if they do get a good offensive line, or if they get a good running back, in reality, they just need to get more weapons. They need to just be a better team overall if they want to seriously compete. And it's a good thing, but hopefully their scouts are dispersed all throughout the United States looking for the best prospects that they can get to build for the future. So, in this game between a great team and a bad team, the great team won in the Buffalo Bills beating the New Orleans Saints 31-19 at home. And kind of sticking with the theme of one great team at home beating a bad team on the road, we have the Detroit Lions at home really dogpiling it on against the Cleveland Browns. See what I did there? But I don't see what the Browns are doing with this idea of starting Joe Flacco, and they've kind of learned from that, is Joe Flacco will be benched for Dillon Gabriel. And we'll start talking mainly about the Browns because Detroit's a great team and they're not as much fun to really microanalyze. But looking at this for the Browns, you know that you have a pretty good running back in Quinshad Judkins. I don't love how they're trying to deploy Dylan Sampson, who I think is a pretty good running back. Same thing with Jerome Ford. But there's just not a ton of talent here. And I still don't understand why it took going 4 weeks into the year to finally say, you know what, maybe Joe Flacco with 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions with a few fumbles is the guy. I mean, you need a 12.6 QBR. That is just putrid isn't the right word. It is just awful. It is just disgusting that has happened to this team. And I think that they're not going to accomplish anything this year. And I'm not making a hot take. That is just something that will end up happening. Do I think there will be a clean house? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Because I do think that while Kevin Stefanski might be an okay coach, I think his welcome is just worn out. And I do think that there is almost a sense of, why did we do this again? Why did we pick up Joe Flacco? Why did we decide, you know what, we're going to go all in with an older quarterback and we're going to draft an older quarterback, and then we're also going to draft another quarterback who attracts the headlines? It just makes no sense on how they've operated as a team. Dysfunction runs rampant, and going up against a team that has historically been a dysfunctional franchise in the Lions, they're not dysfunctional anymore. And they haven't been for a little bit of time, and that's mainly because of Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. And we'll stick with Jared Goff here. I think he played a pretty good game overall. I mean, you don't like the interception, but who cares? Because outside of the first drive of the game for the Browns, the Lions outscored the Browns 34-3. So, I mean, it's like you don't really need to do a ton to actually have won this game. And whenever Jahmyr Gibbs is averaging 6.1 yards per carry, you're just fine with that. And I think Jared Goff has kind of, I don't want to say resurrected his career, because we knew he could be a great player. but he's kind of become close to his potential and reaching it, because now he's more mature than he was when he was with the Rams. He has the experience of when he was with the Rams. He has the composure than when he was with the Rams. And he has better weapons now. Or pretty close to it. And speaking of those weapons, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7 catches, 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day. He had a great game, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is a joy to watch, and he's one of the best players in the NFL. And going up against a team where they don't have a great secondary, and I mean, I don't even think this Browns defense is bad. I just think that when your offense is this much of an abomination, there's not much you can really do, because it's the equivalent of taking a garbage bag and putting a ton of bows on it and ribbons and making it look nice. Okay, cool. You got the exterior looking nice, but I know it's still garbage, and that's what this Browns team is. So, while I do think that, for the Lions, it handled business, you didn't fall victim to a trap game, and you took care of business, there are some things you want to keep growing on. You want to make sure that David Montgomery doesn't average 1.3 yards per carry, but I don't think that'll happen again. So, overall, nothing from this game is really shocking, except for Dylan Gabriel, obviously, starting over Joe Flacco going forward, but I mean, I like Dylan Gabriel-ish. I just don't like this team. I don't think they have talent. I'm not a big fan of some of their play calls. I don't like their coaching at points. I just think that there's so much wrong with this organization that we'll never truly know how good Dylan Gabriel is as long as he's with the Browns. And I think that just stems from this truly dysfunctional franchise. And I think obviously you want Cleveland to do better, but I don't think they will this year. I think this year is gone. And it's just unfortunate to see with Myles Garrett playing as well as he did. And speaking of a defensive lineman, what a way to have a day, Aiden Hutchinson. He had a couple sacks, and he was a big impact player. He sacked Joe Flacco a couple times. He was able to get pressure, and he was able to stop the run. He was just a great player overall, and Detroit has great players, and Cleveland doesn't, and that's why they were able to come away with a 34-10 win at home against the Browns. And for the third straight time, we have a bad team going up against the good team, with the good team being at home and the New England Patriots at home, taking care of business against the Carolina Panthers. And I don't know what to say at this point, because I have given Bryce Young so much benefit of the doubt, and he just keeps letting me down. Because it's like, he didn't play poorly, but he didn't play well enough to win, and obviously you prefer to have that missed kick coming back, but to 1 point, you lost by almost 30. So it didn't matter too much in the grand scheme of things. But for the Patriots, what a way to respond after a heartbreaking loss. And what a way to just really rebound. And all of those other adjectives I don't need to go through. Rebel or fight back. I don't need to go through those. But they worked themselves to be in a position to win this game easily, and where they could have Josh Dobbs come in the game. And speaking of the quarterback position, I think Drake May, oh my goodness, he played well. 3 total touchdowns, 94.6 QBR, I believe one of the highest, if not the highest, of the week. And I just think he played spectacular and sensational, and I think he's going to lead this Patriots team to great things. And I think that kind of parallel to what the Panthers, where you're just left wanting more from Bryce Young, where even whenever he doesn't play poorly, it's just kind of like, are you kidding me? That's all you got? So it's just kind of sad to see that with the Panthers, and I'm kind of done with the Panthers. I'll still be rooting for Bryce Young, and I don't wish poorly on any player, but there are some players that I would, come on, I believe in you more than others. Bryce Young's one of those guys where I'm like, come on, man, please, I want you to succeed. I do, but I just don't know if it's going to happen at this point. And I think there are so many problems in the Panthers organization. I think they're very similar to the Browns, where they have some good players. I mean, they've got Tedoroa McMillan, which I think he played pretty well. 4 catches for 62 yards. Good performance. They got Chuba Hubbard, 10 carries for 49 yards. Pretty good, and then 3 catches for 20 yards. But I just don't think they have any true difference makers, and going up against the team in the Patriots, where I think at the very least they have a couple difference makers, and one of them being a new acquisition in Stephon Diggs, who had his first 100-point game with his first 100-yard game with the Patriots. And if he can get back to the player that he was, oh my goodness, this Patriots team could be dangerous. Do I think they could compete for a championship? Probably not. But I do think that they have someone where I'm going to start some propaganda here, so, take note. Drake May is playing at an MVP caliber right now. He's played that good. I have that much faith in him. I love his arm talent. I think he has good mobility. I just think that he needs to keep building on the little things, and obviously that'll happen when you're a year 2 quarterback. But, man, the ceiling is just so high for this Patriots team, and I don't think the ceiling for this Panthers team is that high. In fact, I think it is quite low. So overall in this game, the Patriots able to basically do whatever they wanted with them, even though the running attack for the Patriots wasn't there that much. I mean, they did have 3 touchdowns running the ball, but they didn't average a great yards per carry. Didn't really matter. The Patriots special teams not played up to their standards. They played fantastic. They had a long touchdown and they had a long return, so that put them in good positions there. But even if you take that out of the game, the Patriots offense was better and their Patriots defense was better. And the Patriots were better on their special teams unit. So all 3 aspects of the game, the Patriots were better than the Panthers, and you're not going to lose many games when that happens. And this was one of those games where it was just kind of a blowout and a total decimation of the Carolina Panthers. And so obviously I'm, super stoked about the Patriots. Although it's kind of like, you just won 6 Super Bowls. Do you need to have another good quarterback? Can you please just suffer for a few years? Yeah, 2 years of suffering, and you're already going back to, being this insane team. But I do really like the Patriots. Do I think they're going to compete for a Super Bowl this year? No, but I do think that if they can keep building, they could be a dangerous team for years to come. So, in this game, the New England Patriots at home absolutely beat down the Carolina Panthers 42-13. And then moving all the way up, and from going from one team with the young NFL quarterback to another, we have the New York Giants at home with the upset of the season to this point, beating the LA Chargers 21-18 in Jackson Dart's first ever NFL start. And I do think he played pretty well. He was able to pass the ball okay. Obviously, in his first game, he's not going to be lighting defenses up for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns and looking like an MVP, but I think he played pretty well against a very good defense, and he also ran the ball effectively. 10 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, that is nothing to scoff at. And I think he played well. But I think that when we talk about this game, the first thing that we've got to majorly address is Malik Nabers. And obviously, you never wish any type of injury on a player or any player. And it's just unfortunate to see another person get injured and have to go through a long rehab process because of the field that is at MetLife Stadium. And they need to change it, and they need to change it now because it's just dangerous. The same thing happened with Joe Alt, where he had a injury. It sucks. You never wish injuries for players, and it is just awful that it has to happen. And I don't know why we as an NFL community and the NFL doesn't just say, you know what, MetLife, you need to change to go to grass, because it's just dangerous. Players get hurt on it every year. It has some of the most injuries, and it just is unfortunate to see, and obviously you don't wish injuries on any player. But looking strictly just at the football aspect of this, Jackson Dart, I think he played well. I ran the ball effectively, passed it pretty well. And I think this Giants team played very physical and tough. And when I say, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I think the Giants out Jim Harbaugh'd Jim Harbaugh, because they didn't run the ball great, but they did run it, and they did try with 42 rushes compared to the Chargers only rushing 13 times. And I do think that, honestly, Jackson Dart did look good. But if you can get Cam Scatterboo going and you can get Devin Singletary going with Jackson Dart being a good runner, that is a pretty good way to distinguish yourself from other teams and try to find a way to win games. Because if your defense is playing well and you're running the ball, at the very least, those are 2 things that you can take up clock. And if you can just put yourself in position to succeed, that'll help you, succeed. And they did that in this game. Their defense able to hold the red-hot Chargers offense to only 18 points and force Justin Herbert into the worst game of his season so far. And I think looking at it from the Chargers, obviously they're a good team. I'm not too worried about it long term. You do wish that Justin Herbert played better. But Omarion Hampton, he played great. 10.7 yards per carry and a touchdown with 37 receiving yards on 5 catches. So I do think that there are more emergences that are coming for this Chargers team. And I do think that the Chargers are, I don't want to say an outside team, because now we're starting to see them elevate to the level that they can play at. Again, even though this is a loss, I do still have that faith in them. And I do think that they could have an outside chance of competing for a championship. And so I'm not too worried about it for the Chargers, because I don't think Justin Herbert will play this poorly again for a very long time. And honestly, there's not much to say for the Chargers. They didn't execute, and the Giants did, and that's why they won this game. And that's why New York got their first win of the season. So congratulations to him. Congratulations to Jackson Dart on a very good and respectable debut with 2 total touchdowns. And I believe he played turnover free. He did play turnover free. But I think that that's good. You now kind of understand why they benched Russell Wilson for him, because it's like, you know what, if he's able to do that against a good defense, imagine what he could do when he's building. Imagine what he could do against the worst defense when he's had more time in the NFL and gaining more experience and just understanding more about what it means to play in the NFL, getting more familiar with his receivers, although league neighbors won't be there. But I do think that there are tons of good things to take away from the Giants and for the Chargers. I'm just going to say, you know what, unfortunate on the next week. So, in this game at MetLife Stadium, the Giants at home come away with a 21-18 victory over the LA Chargers. And then we're moving down to Tampa Bay in maybe the weirdest game of the week, where the Philadelphia Eagles travel to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers, and they come away with a win. But as an Eagles fan, I have mixed feelings about this game, because in the first half, this was a 24-6 game, and then it just kind of went progressively downhill from there. So I think that there is some stuff to build on for the Eagles. Obviously, you do want Saquon Barkley playing better, but I do think that does stem from the offensive line. For the Eagles not playing up to their standards, because I think Landon Dickerson is more hurt after his surgery, because he did have surgery and came back very quickly from it, which we do admire the effort. But maybe you consider saying, you know what, just take a week to rest up and make sure you're good. And that kind of applies to Cam Jurgens as well, because the interior line for the Eagles has not played that well. And then you look at the right tackle with Lane Johnson, where he had another injury and he had to come out for the rest of the game. And that's kind of whenever things went downhill. So I think that there is some, like, oh no moments for this team. But it's also, you put up 31 points against a good team in the road against a team that has kind of had the Eagles' number all year. So I think that there is some good and some bad looking at this. I do think that with Kevin Patullo, I don't think that he's a bad offensive coordinator. I just think that I'm going to give him 2 more weeks before it's kind of like, okay, you know what, he's just awful. Fire him, whatever. But I do think that we're getting to a point now where it's like we're a month into the season. We got to have some sort of identity, and I'm tired. Saquon Barkley runs up the middle. Could we please do anything else? Could we do a mountain smash? I'm tired of running duo and inside zone. Please do literally anything else. Please do tosses. Do outside zones. I'm trying to think of every other run concept. Just don't run it up the middle. But looking at the Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, he played well. And obviously he had 1 interception that was tipped by Reed Blankenship that went to Jahad Campbell. And Jahad Campbell, he had a great game, except for he had a bad lapse in man coverage against Bucky Irving. But there were 2 of those for this Buccaneers team where they were able to capitalize on weaknesses / poor execution from this Eagles team. And that's exactly what you want to see from a team in Tampa Bay that wants to, or at least in my opinion, wants to compete for a championship and does have an outside chance of it. But I do think that they kind of need to shore up their defense a little bit. But it's also, you held the team that had 24 points in the first half to where they had 0 completions in the second half. So it's like, there's steps here, but it's also, you just got yourself back into the game. You just didn't finish when it mattered most. And I think that for the Eagles, there are some concerns. There are some bad The Buccaneers, you know Emeka Egbuka is great, you know Bucky Irving is great, and you know Baker Mayfield is great. Those are the two things that you can at least say, you know what, we have our quarterback, receiver, and running back set up, as well as Chris Godwin coming back and having not that great of a game, all things considered. He kind of got locked down by Quinyon Mitchell, but that is one of the best corners in the NFL, so I'm not going to blame him entirely for not playing spectacular against him. So overall for this game, there is some good and some bad for both of these two teams, where the Eagles, I guess, just had less bad and came away in Tampa Bay with the win 31-25 on the road, once again, in Tampa. And going from one of the most interesting games, we're going to one of the most depressing games. Because for the Texans, C.J. Stroud played pretty good football, and they came away with the win. They were able to get some semblance of a running game going with 3.7 yards per carry and a touchdown on the ground. And I think overall Houston played a good game. But I do think that kind of gets lost in the fact that this Titans team, more specifically this Titans coaching staff, is just committing malpractice by having this team look worse and worse and worse every week. Because why you are only running the ball 18 times when you are averaging 4.6 yards per carry, and that number is brought down because of a Chimere Dike run where it was a loss of 4. So in reality, this running game was even better, and you just didn't utilize it. Now I get, you know what, you were down 6-0 at half, so you don't even get that excuse of saying, oh, you know what, we're down by 40, we got to pass the ball. You just kind of collapse towards the end of the game and you allow 20 points in the fourth quarter, which if you want to be any serious football team is just unacceptable. And I think it's just unfortunate seeing how Cam Ward's rookie season is gone, where I don't even think he's played poorly in any of these games. I don't think he's played bad. I just think that there's not much talent around him. His coaching staff isn't doing him any favors. And this is just a bad football team going up against a slightly less bad football team in the Houston Texans. So this is just a sad situation to see. Obviously, you don't want any player to struggle. But that's kind of what this Titans team is. If I were to give the Titans one word, it would be struggle. They struggle defending the pass. They struggle defending the run against a team that isn't good with the run. And they struggle to do anything of note on offense. So this is just such a disgusting situation, and I don't see how Brian Callahan keeps his job going all the way at the end of this year. I think that he will get fired in the offseason at the very latest, although I wouldn't be surprised if he gets fired during their bye, because this team just doesn't look prepared. They're getting worse and worse as each week goes on, and it's just complete malpractice from the coaching staff to not get better at any discernible trait throughout the course of the NFL season is unacceptable. And well, the Texans exploited it, winning 26-0 at home against the Tennessee Titans. And going from one of the most southern games to one of the most western games, we have the LA Rams at home taking on the Indianapolis Colts. And we'll start with the Rams. Matt Stafford, he's played well up to this point in the season. He's a month in. I think he's played good football. So is Kyren Williams. And so is the rest of this Rams team, as their one loss was one of the closest losses you can get, but a loss nonetheless. And I think their quality and their experience kind of showed here against kind of a young-ish Colts team. And speaking of like a young player who made some mistakes, Adonai Mitchell. I don't know how in this current day and age you are still fumbling the ball out of the back of the end zone without being touched, where you're trying to celebrate and you kind of stick your arm out where it's like, oh, haha, look, touchdown, but you fumble it out of the back of the end zone and you end up costing your team at least 6 points there. And then on a Jonathan Taylor long touchdown run, you get a holding penalty. So then that one comes back as well. So I don't want to say it's all on one player because he did end up having the most receiving yards on the team. But if he just wasn't as boneheaded, the Colts win this football game. So you're looking at it. I think this Colts team is good, and I think this Rams team is good. So I'm not too concerned with either of these two teams. I think they're both pretty well coached, but it's just so frustrating whenever you're this close to achieving something great, and one of your young players who I think has a ton of potential in Adonai Mitchell makes two boneheaded decisions that really alter the course of the game. And it's just unfortunate that we, as an NFL community, won't recognize, hey, you know what? Just because Daniel Jones didn't play great, that doesn't mean he played awful. I know that he had 2 interceptions, but if Adonai Mitchell doesn't fumble that ball out of the back of the end zone, he has 2 touchdowns right there. I mean, I think that counts for something. I think being able to take one of the best teams in the NFL at home, taking one of the best NFL teams in their home stadium to the ropes is a great accomplishment and feat. And unfortunately, it's not going to show up as that great feat because of one player making a couple of mistakes. Now, obviously, football's a team sport, so obviously, you know what? If the blocking was better, maybe Adonai Mitchell wouldn't have held. There's no excuse for the other one. I mean, that was just one of the worst things you can do as a receiver. But I do think that there is some good to come out of this from the Colts, because now you know that you can at least hang with some of the best teams in the NFL, and you did that while being a road team in Rams House, as that stadium is affectionately called. You do that, and you don't look bad doing it either, because they were so close to winning this game. They were just a couple of mistakes away. So I think there's a ton of good to come out of this from the Colts. And the Rams, you know what? They found a way to win. Matt Stafford played great. Their running game was pretty good, and especially Kyren Williams. I think he played well. So I think there is a ton of good to come out of this game. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Puka Nacua. I mean, that man is a beast. 13 catches, 170 yards, and 170 yards on a touchdown. He is just a beast. I think this game was pretty entertaining to watch. But why did you have to fumble it out of the back of the end zone, and why did you have to commit that holding penalty? That's what this game's going to end up going back to. Fair or not, it's going to go back on Adonai Mitchell for making a couple of just boneheaded decisions. And you know what? Hopefully that teaches this Colts team a lesson of being more disciplined and, I guess, not counting your chickens before they're hatched, because, again, they should have won this game. But some good to come out of this from both teams, where the Rams at home beat the Colts 27-20. And kind of sticking to the West Coast, we have the 49ers at home taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And before this game, we had a ton of the Liam Cohen stealing signs fiasco from Robert Saleh, which, you know what, in my opinion, if it's legal, every team would do it. Kind of my thoughts on the tush push, but that's besides the point. For the 49ers, since they're the home team, I'll talk about them first. Brock Purdy, 3 turnovers, not acceptable if you want to be a serious team in the NFL, and he has a ton of turnovers in his last full season, starting with, I believe, 18 interceptions in his last 17 games started. But he just hasn't played up to his caliber, and I do think Brock Purdy is a great quarterback, and it sucks, again, that he's going to miss another game due to his toe injury that he sustained in this game. It's just unfortunate. This 49ers team seems to get injured just from breathing at points. Like, they'd crack a lung. They'd crack a rib in their lung just from breathing, because this team is so injury-prone, and it's just unfortunate seeing that happen. But I do think that Christian McCaffrey, speaking of a guy who's a bit injury-prone, he played well, and I'm not too concerned about that calf injury that he had, because while he did only average 2.9 yards per carry, he did average 15.3 yards per catch, and he had 92 yards on 6 catches and a touchdown. So I think that he played well, but it's just this 49ers team is so banged up, so injured, and whenever you have an opportunity against an okay team in Jacksonville, which is what I think they are, you got to be able to capitalize on it, and they didn't. And credit to Jacksonville. They were able to get 17 points in the second quarter and get 9 points in the third quarter, and just get enough to make sure that San Fran doesn't come back into this game. But I still don't love I don't love what I see out of Trevor Lawrence. I feel like he's regressed from the player that he was, where 66.3 QBR is, okay. But going up against an injured team with no Nick Bosa, I feel like this is whenever you've got a strike being great over the middle. And, he was just okay at it. And speaking of over the middle, Brian Thomas Jr., where he thrived getting over the middle catches last year from Mac Jones, not from Trevor Lawrence, where he succeeded. He got 5 targets, or he had 5 catches on 7 targets for 49 yards, and it's improvement, but it's not up to the caliber of, I'd say, a top 15 receiver in the NFL is where I think he can be. And speaking of great receivers, Travis Hunter, you got to find a way to get him more than 5 targets, I think. When you're throwing it 31 times, I don't think, at least, you should be giving targets to Johnny Munt, Parker Washington, and Tim Patrick and giving them 4. I just don't think that's what you would do. At least considering they had 0, or considering those 3 combined had 1 catch for -1 yard. I just don't think that that's going to be conducive, and I would prefer those targets go to Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. So I think overall for the 49ers, didn't capitalize. Unfortunate, and it's at home. But, it's going to be the Mac Jones era once again because he's going to be having to step back up. And I do think that this 49ers team is just so, I don't want to say injury prone because it's always the craziest thing, but I will use that term of injury prone. And it's just unfortunate because I think that they can be a really good team. They just get injured. And for Jacksonville, obviously getting a 3-1 is great. They have an easy schedule coming up. So I do think that they can get to about 7-2 or so. So I think there's a big culture shift down in Duval. But I do think that for Jacksonville, they're a better team than they were last year. Their culture seemed to be better, and they're having a lot more joy. Travis Hunter. But I do think that overall for Jacksonville, they're playing better than they were last year, and they're making steps of progress. And I do think that's all that you can hope for in the first year of your head coach. So in this game at home, San Francisco falls short 21-26 against the visiting Jacksonville Jaguars. And in a game where a lot of people would consider a make-it-break-it game between the Kansas City Chiefs at home at Arrowhead taking on the Baltimore Ravens. And we'll start with the Chiefs, right, because they won the game. Mahomes, he finally emerged from, I don't know if it's his cocoon or what, but he just flourished. Super accurate, 4 touchdowns, 270 yards passing, as well as not having to run the ball a ton, which is something that has kind of been a problem. And it still does remain a problem because their leading rusher is Xavier Worthy, their receiver. But he got the win, and he did it in convincing fashion against a team that I think is pretty good in the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll let the Chiefs have credit for that. But I think that now that their weapons are starting to come back, or at least Xavier Worthy's come back, their offense has opened up. It's looked better. And I have been impressed with what I've seen from Tyquan Thornton. I do think that he's played pretty well for the Chiefs. And I think that this Chiefs offense is getting back to where they were a couple years ago, where it's like, you know what? They may not have the most insane talent, but they know how to utilize their personnel and put Mahomes and the rest of this offense into the best position to succeed. And that's what they did against the Ravens. And we'll stick with the Ravens here. I don't know where to begin with this because they had their best defensive lineman out for this game in Nnamdi Madubuike, who's out for the rest of the season with a neck injury. And when Coach Harbaugh was asked, how does this feel going forward? We hope he rehabs well. I hope that it doesn't affect, whatever. Not giving much confidence there, right? And obviously you never want any type of injury like that to happen to a player, just larger than football. You don't want any type of injury above the waist, really, or any injury for a player, but you don't want it around that neck area. And then they lose their linebacker in Roquan Smith, and then they lose Marlon Humphrey, although Marlon Humphrey's been going in and out of the lineup this year. So you lose 3 of your best defensive players, and you're going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's not really going to be a great day. But then add on top of that, you lost Lamar Jackson with a hamstring injury. Now, it was a weird-looking injury, but for this narrative that people are saying, you know what, he's not trying, or he doesn't care about football and that he gave up on his team, I think that is just ridiculous. Because when you look at the end of last year in Buffalo after that Mark Andrews drop, and you see him throwing his helmet, and you see the pure, just, I don't want to say anguish, but the frustration, and you're questioning his desire to win, that is just silly to me. And I don't want to say that this is something that is, I don't want to say that this is done out of resentment for him, but it just seems way too personal of a critique than something, oh, you know what, he didn't pass the ball well enough because he had an interception, it wasn't a great pick, and he didn't have a great QBR. Those are valid points to have. But I think going after, willingness to win or passion is just stupid to me. And I think the big way and the big thing that kind of cost the Ravens in this game was they weren't able to run the ball because outside of Justice Hill, they had 90 rushing yards. Now, again, you don't want to run the ball when you're trailing, and especially whenever you're trailing by 10 at Arrowhead. That's just going to be a near impossible feat to come back from, and evidently they didn't. So, in this game, Kansas City returns back to form. They drop 37 on the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens fall to a very difficult position as they go to 1-3 on the NFL season. And then sticking in the AFC West, we have the Las Vegas Raiders at home taking on the Bears, with the Bears blocking a kick to win the game. Where have I, as an Eagles fan, seen this before? I'll just have to think about that later. But for the Bears, they played well. Caleb Williams played pretty well, I think. He didn't have to run the ball a ton, which is a good thing. But speaking of running the ball, the Bears just have to be better. Running the ball, 2.7 yards per carry just isn't great at all. And you don't want to put too much strain on Caleb Williams being forced to throw it 37 times, which is not what you want to do. But you're 2-2 on the year, and this is probably the best that the Bears' future has looked in a long time. So there are tons of good to come out of this game, right? Now, Caleb Williams did fumble it twice, but he did recover them. So, he only turned it over once. But I think that you got to work on the running game. And I think that you just got to work on kind of being, honestly, better. And I think that that's I know it's a basic way to say it, but they just have to work at being better offensively and defensively. They've got to work at being a better pass blocking team, a better run blocking team, and to be better on defense all the way around, especially stopping the run, as we'll see in this game. And looking over at the Raiders side, I think that Geno Smith has let me down, because I had said before the year that I love this. I love Geno Smith in Vegas. I like this kind of, we're going to put Geno Smith in a good position with a good running back, a good tight end, and a good receiver, and a good big play receiver in Trey Tucker, as well as a not bad backup running back in Raheem Mostert, and he just let me down. A 26 QBR is not good enough. A 73 passer rating is not good enough. But it's not even like he threw for a ton of yards or many touchdowns to make up for it. He threw for 117 yards, but he had 3 interceptions. That's just not acceptable. And you do all this when Ashton Jeanty has the best game of his career, averaging 6.6 yards per carry and getting a touchdown, as well as getting 2 touchdowns receiving. So it's like you just waste the best game of his career in the NFL so far, and you don't get anything out of it. Also, it is kind of funny that as soon as Ashton Jeanty switched to his college stance, instantly better, instantly has the best game of his career. Totally has nothing to do at all with the Bears. Not great. Run defense at all, again, has nothing to do with that. That is completely irrelevant. I don't know why you'd bring that up. But I think the Bears, they have some stuff that they need to work on. The Raiders, I don't know what you do at quarterback, because Aiden O'Connell, I don't think you're going to get back in there, buddy. But it's just unfortunate to see. Good to know that that we can finally shut all of these dumb narratives up with Ashton Jeanty being a bust 3 games into his career. It was dumb in the first place, but finally, we know Ashton Jeanty can make it in the NFL, and we know that he can be a great player in the NFL, but it's just unfortunate that his best game as a pro had to be wasted by the Raiders, which is kind of what they do, with the Bears on the road in Las Vegas, with a ton of fans in Vegas, which I'm not going to speak on that, coming away victorious, 25-24, once again, against the Las Vegas Raiders. And earlier, if I said that we're at the craziest game of this week of the NFL, I would like to just rescind that statement, because this 40-40 tie between the Dallas Cowboys and Green Bay Packers is that. We'll start with, I can't even start with the victor. We'll start with the road team. Jordan Love, good game. What a way to respond after a poor performance against the Browns. He had 337 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, he did, I believe, have a fumble as he was throwing. He did. But able to recover well, and I think he played well. 28 rushing yards, 330 passing yards. He played good enough to win, but his defense just didn't carry the job for him, and I think Micah Parsons, except for one play, didn't have as much of an impact as we thought he would in his return game to Dallas. And speaking of Dallas, we'll look over at them. Dak Prescott is one of the more underappreciated quarterbacks in the NFL, because he is close to a top 10 quarterback. But listen, I'm saying this as an Eagles fan. This is hurting me to say. Dak is underrated by some fans. By most fans, he's underrated. But for those Dallas fans who think he's taking you to a Super Bowl, he's not, and that's fine. But I think for overall, the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, he played a good game. Their defense kind of let them down. That's kind of the case for both of these two teams. And George Pickens finally rose to the level that he is capable of now that CeeDee Lamb is out for a few weeks with, I believe, a high ankle sprain. But George Pickens, 8 catches, 134, 2 touchdowns. He played a very good game. But it's like it's a wasted game, because you waste a good offensive performance for both of these two teams, and your defense has the worst performance they've had all year. So one of the craziest games, one of the craziest shifts that I've seen towards the end of the second quarter, where you know what, it's all Packers, and then right back, the Cowboys come storming, and they're able to find themselves with an opportunity to go up at half, and I believe they do go up at half. No, they do go up at halftime. And it just completely flips the course of the game, but the Packers are able to find a way to get back into it and eventually make it the most competitive game of the season so far, with it being a 40-40 tie between the Dallas Cowboys at home against the Green Bay Packers and Micah Parsons' revenge game in Dallas. And then sticking with primetime, we have a Monday night doubleheader between the Miami Dolphins at home going against the New York Jets. And going into this game, I thought it's going to be unfortunate that one of these teams is going to get a win. Because I don't think either of these two teams are great. But the Dolphins came away with the win, and I do think Tua, he played pretty well. Obviously, I don't think he played up to the standard that he's capable of, because I've seen what he can do. Just a few years ago, he was in MVP talks. And it's just unfortunate seeing his career kind of turn this way. But we'll stick with just this game. I think he played well. I think the Dolphins' running game played well, and I think their defense was able to get timely stops, specifically on that first drive by the Jets, where they're just driving all the way down the field, and they're able to get a peanut punch the ball out at the 1-yard line, and able to recover. I think that kind of shifts the momentum of the game, although it was only in the first quarter. You know, if they get 7 points here, boom, scores flip, Jets get the first win, and the Dolphins are left looking for answers. So I think that the Dolphins are able to find ways to win, but I do think that there is still a ton of work that they need to do if they want to actually be a serious team. But I don't think they will be a serious team, and especially now more so that Tyreek Hill had just a disgusting injury. Obviously, I know I've said this before, you don't wish injuries on any player, but whenever your leg is supposed to be going like this, and it's going like this, never wish that on anyone. But going back to this Dolphins team, I think that they just have so much they need to do, and I don't think Mike McDaniel is the right coach for this. And speaking of a team with a new coach, the Jets, they've played physical, they've played tough, and they've played their own brand of football, running it 28 times, getting 7 yards per carry. All of that kind of built off the back of Justin Fields. He had 226 passing yards and 81 rushing yards and a touchdown with it. So he kind of was the one that kept them in this game and really played and elevated himself. And it's just unfortunate that his defense didn't rise to the occasion. And I think with this Jets team, are they a good team? No. Do I think they are better, at least building for the future, than they were last year? Yes. Do I think they have their quarterback for the future? I have no idea. Because there's some good that you see out of Justin Fields, but there's also just like, I'm sorry? What? But overall, I think that there is some good to be taken out of this from the Jets. You know, Justin Fields can at least be a decent passing quarterback, although that was against a very, very bad defense in the Dolphins, and against the very bad defense in the Dolphins, and yet 7 yards a carry, which I don't think will ever happen for them this year, but able to get at least a competitive game. But you don't like ugly losses. Obviously, you prefer ugly wins over pretty losses, and the Jets are the absolute premium at doing the pretty loss stuff. That's how they lost, I believe, 3 out of their 4 games. It's just like, oh, you're so close, but just not able to finish the job, and the Dolphins did. And that's why they were able to come away with a at-home 27-21 victory over the New York Jets. And I know I said that in last game we need to get a new coach in here when talking about the Dolphins. We need to get a new coach in Cincy, because I don't know what Cincinnati is doing. I know I've voiced my frustrations with how they've built their roster, but the fact that you look this unprepared and you play this poorly against the Broncos team that I don't even think played great. They didn't play up to their potential. And if they did, you would have probably lost by 40, because this was an embarrassing performance for Zach Taylor. And honestly, I joked after watching this game that they need to leave him in Denver, and I'm only half joking when I say that, because this was just a completely just gutless performance from this team. Joe Burrow goes down, and your entire team is like, oh, who cares? You know, season's over. No, show some fight. And that's not what they did. They didn't fight. They gave up, they rolled over on their stomachs, and they gave up. And you know what? Credit to the Broncos. They were able to capitalize on it. I think Bo Nix played pretty well. I think they were able to run the ball very well. I mean, 4.9 yards per carry on 186 and 2 touchdowns is not at all a bad performance. But I mean, you're going up against a team that I think quit. So I don't know how you view this game for the Broncos going forward. Because okay, cool, you won 28-3, but I think you went up against a team that quit and or died. I am just disgusted by how this Bengals team performed against the Broncos, and words can't even describe, because disgusted isn't the right word, and it's not even agitated. It's just disappointment. I am disappointed in the Cincinnati Bengals because this was a team just a few years ago that was competing to win a Super Bowl, and now they're probably, or at least in my opinion, should get rid of their head coach, should completely retool this team, and I think I don't want to say rebuild, but you've got to completely retool this defense. You got to build an offensive line, which they've never done, so I'm not going to act like they will, but it's just so sad to see this happen to a great player like Ja'Marr Chase, where you can see the frustration where it's like, just get him the ball. I know we had 8 targets, but get him just some, like, even if it's just simple, putting him in the backfield to where you can get touches in the open field. Just get him some way to get the ball. Because Jake Browning, you know what? He's an okay backup, but that's what he is, a backup. And do I think this team will accomplish anything with him as a starter? No. But I also think this isn't a good team. I don't think this is a well-coached team. This isn't a well-constructed team. And this isn't a well-run team. So all in all, I think the Bengals just completely let themselves and the city of Cincinnati down. And Denver took advantage of that. And all credit to Denver. They played a good, complete team win. And that's why they came away with a 28-3 win over the Cincinnati Bengals. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all for this week of the NFL season. I'm, of course, Coop, and this has been The Scoop with Coop. Until next time.